The sky above the Royal Crest Hotel was a bruised, heavy gray, pressing down on the city with the weight of an unspoken threat. Sapphire, Del, Red, Jack, and Suna stood at the base of the grand entrance, looking up at the towering, opulent facade. The hotel did not look like a place of hospitality. It looked like a tomb. A murder had occurred within these walls, and the silence radiating from the lobby felt unnatural, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The team moved in unison, their boots clicking against the polished stone steps. They stopped at the threshold, the massive glass doors reflecting their own determined faces. Inside, the air was still, smelling faintly of expensive floor wax and something metallic that lingered just beneath the surface. Every corridor was a labyrinth of hushed whispers and shadows, waiting for them to peel back the layers of the crime. They did not speak. There was no need. The mission was absolute. Locate the killer, secure the evidence, and bring the truth to light. Sapphire pushed the heavy door open, and the team stepped into the cavernous lobby. The lobby was a sprawling expanse of marble and gold, but it felt like a trap. Sapphire signaled the group, her eyes scanning the upper balconies and the dark corridors branching off the main hall. They needed to cover ground quickly. With a silent nod, the team dispersed. Red and Jack moved toward the service elevators, their footsteps echoing against the high ceiling. Suna headed for the administrative offices, while Sapphire took the grand staircase. Del paused, her gaze lingering on the heavy velvet curtains near the entrance. Outside, the low, rhythmic purr of a high-performance engine cut through the oppressive silence of the street. The team members still in the lobby turned toward the glass doors. A sleek vehicle slowed to a stop, its tires crunching against the gravel. The driver door opened, and Fokina stepped out. She did not look like a guest, nor did she look like staff. She moved with a deliberate, calculated pace, her eyes sweeping over the hotel facade before she pushed through the main entrance. Her arrival shifted the air in the room, turning the team's focused investigation into something far more volatile. They were no longer just hunting a killer. They were now being watched by an unknown variable. Del moved away from the main lobby, her boots muffled by thick carpet as she navigated toward the hotel bar. The space was a cavern of deep mahogany and amber light, far removed from the sterile intensity of the search. She pushed the heavy door open, the scent of aged spirits and stale smoke greeting her. The bar was empty, save for one figure. Taro sat on a high stool, his back to the entrance, a glass balanced precariously between his fingers. He did not turn when she approached. Del stepped into the dim light, her hand resting near her side, watching him. He swirled the liquid in his glass, the ice clinking against the crystal. Del pulled out the stool next to him, the wood scraping against the floor. She did not ask if the seat was taken. She simply waited. Taro finally turned his head, a faint, knowing curve to his lips that did not reach his eyes. He took a slow sip, his gaze lingering on the dark mirrors. Del leaned in, her voice dropping to a low, steady pitch. Taro merely smiled, his casual posture masking a sharp, calculated intelligence. Taro did not look at her, but his voice was clear, cutting through the ambient hum of the bar. He spoke of patterns, of blind spots, and of a room where the hotel kept its secrets. He mentioned the security hub, a place Del knew well from her past work. Without another word, he slid a small, metallic keycard across the polished wood. Del took it, her fingers brushing the cold surface, and stood. She left him there, a shadow in the amber light, and moved through the service corridors. The air grew colder, the hum of machinery replacing the muffled sounds of the hotel. She reached the security room, the heavy door locking behind her with a sharp click. Rows of monitors flickered, casting a pale, rhythmic light against the walls. She swiped the card, the system chirping in response. She navigated the logs, her hands steady despite the rising pressure in her chest. She pulled up the footage from the hour of the murder. The screen flickered, graining into focus. A figure moved through the hallway, then stopped, turning toward the lens. Del froze. A jolt of adrenaline surged through her, cold and sharp. She leaned closer, her breath hitching as the identity of the perpetrator burned into her mind. Dell burst from the security room, her voice cutting through the lobby's quiet. She relayed the identity, and the team moved as one. They abandoned the hotel, spilling out into the cold air of the station just as the distant whistle of a departing train echoed against the concrete. They sprinted across the platform, the metal tracks vibrating beneath their boots. The train was already gaining speed, the rhythmic clatter of steel wheels growing louder. They reached the edge of the platform as the last car slid past. Jack signaled, and they lunged, fingers catching the cold iron of the handrails. The momentum jerked them hard, feet scrambling for purchase against the slick metal steps. One by one, they hauled themselves up, the wind whipping past them. As the station blurred into a streak of gray, they stood on the narrow vestibule, gasping for air, the train swaying violently. The clatter of the wheels beneath them became a steady, relentless drumbeat, a countdown to the confrontation ahead. They moved toward the interior door, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the path forward. The suspect was somewhere in those carriages, and the distance between them was closing. The team kicked open the carriage door, the wind instantly roaring into the narrow space. The suspect was there, backed against the far wall, eyes darting toward the emergency exit. He lunged for the ladder, his boots clanging against the metal rungs as he scrambled upward. The team followed, hauling themselves onto the roof just as the train rounded a sharp bend. The world tilted violently. The suspect stood on the slick, vibrating surface, gripping a heavy iron latch he had ripped from the roof panel. He swung it in a wide, punishing arc. Sapphire ducked, the metal whistling inches above her head, the force of the swing nearly knocking her off balance. They were exposed, buffeted by the gale, the ground a blurred streak of gray far below. Every step was a gamble against the swaying momentum of the train. Jack lunged, catching the suspect by the shoulder, but the man twisted, driving an elbow into Jack's ribs. The impact sent them both sliding toward the edge. They scrambled, fingers clawing at the metal plating for purchase. The suspect kicked out, his boot connecting with Suna's arm, forcing her back. It was a chaotic, breathless dance of survival, neither side yielding an inch. The train accelerated, the roar of the wind drowning out every shout, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the relentless, metallic shriek of the tracks. The suspect lunged away from the group, his boots skidding on the vibrating metal. He reached the cabin hatch, ripped it open, and dropped inside. The team followed, sliding down the ladder just as the suspect slammed his weight into the conductor. The man tumbled, his head striking the console with a sickening crack. The suspect grabbed the controls, wrenching the throttle into the red. The train surged forward, the engine screaming as it pushed past its limits. The conductor struggled to regain his footing, but the suspect shoved him into the door, pinning him against the glass. The train lurched violently, the wheels screeching in protest against the steel rails. Sparks showered the cabin as the locomotive began to sway, the rhythm of the tracks turning into a chaotic, bone-shaking vibration. The suspect laughed. Then, the front wheels hit a gap. The entire carriage lifted, the metal groaning under the immense pressure. The world outside the windows tilted 90 degrees. The train left the tracks, the screeching metal replaced by the terrifying silence of free fall. They were careening toward the dark water waiting below. The impact was not a splash, but a bone-jarring collision with a solid wall. The cabin crumpled inward as the train hit the surface, the water rushing in with the force of a tidal wave. Glass shattered, and the cabin filled with freezing, churning darkness. The team was tossed against the metal walls, the weight of the water pinning them down. Suna kicked out at the side window, her heel striking the frame until the glass finally gave way. They scrambled through the jagged opening, lungs burning, pulling themselves toward the faint light above. The current was a violent, swirling force, dragging them toward the riverbed, but they fought through the debris, limbs thrashing until their heads broke the surface. They gasped, dragging themselves onto the muddy bank, coughing up water and clutching their bruised ribs. The silence that followed the crash was absolute, broken only by the lapping of the river. A detached train car lay half submerged in the silt. Gold coins caught the dying light, and necklaces of jewels lay scattered in the mud. The team stood, shaking the river mud from their hands. Before they could move toward the wreckage, a branch snapped overhead. Taro dropped from the canopy, landing in a crouch with silent precision. He pointed toward the spilled contents of the train car. The gold and jewels were not just cargo, they were the motive. Taro explained that the suspect had been systematically stripping the hotel, using the murder as a distraction to cover his tracks. The team turned their attention back to the twisted metal of the train car. A movement caught their eyes. The suspect was crawling from the wreckage, his movements sluggish and pained. He saw them and tried to scramble toward the tree line, but Jack and Red intercepted him, closing the distance in 3 long strides. The suspect lunged, but his strength was gone. He collapsed into the mud as the team pinned his arms. Sapphire stepped forward, retrieving a heavy gold chain from the silt to secure the evidence. The suspect stopped fighting, his head dropping against the wet earth as the reality of his situation took hold. The sirens began to wail in the distance, a steady, rhythmic sound that cut through the quiet of the riverbank. The investigation that began in the opulent halls had ended here. As the authorities arrived to take the suspect into custody, the team watched the handcuffs click shut. Justice had finally arrived.